I lived it. I don't want to necessarily repeat it. And you've lived part of it. You've been there. You've heard my stories. But there's still people out there that haven't heard it. So it's fresh to them. It's fresh and new to them.
And we did it, and you did it in a way that a lot of kids don't do it today. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
mean, I told you the story, when we used to have band practice, with our tourists. Everyone would come over to my living room. We'd set up in the living room. We'd watch fucking Looney Tunes while my mom was shopping.
Yeah.
People are like, "You had band practice in your living room?" Yeah. We didn't have anywhere else.
Hmm.
Where I lived in Deltona, the closest place we could go, we could have got a warehouse, would have been to fucking Altamont Springs or Longwood. And
Hmm. Yeah.
as teenagers, people that don't know, I'll talk in kilometers. That's like 50 kilometers away from where I grew up. And as teenagers, you didn't have a way of getting that far. So everyone just come over
Mhm.
to my house. We'd bring my fucking Sean would bring his drums over and his borrow his parents' van. We'd set everything up in the living room. We didn't have a PA. I used the old stereo system. I'd plug a freaking microphone, a Radio Shack microphone into the input of the stereo system. And that's how we practice. And it's funny that I've had people go, really? That's kind of cool. And for me, that seems like the most basic, normal thing. Recording a
Yeah.
demo in my bedroom.
Yeah.
I slept for at least 6 or 7 months with my head in the bass drum because
Yeah. I was going to say that. I was going to say that. Yep.
yeah,
Because your rooms are so small and all the equipment's in there. And
yeah,
yep.
we put everything into my bedroom, and I had no room. I took out my bed so we could practice in there. And the only place that was big enough in the bedroom for me to fucking lay down was to basically use the
Did,
pillow in the bass drum.
did you take the bed out or did you put it up against the walls to act as a sound barrier? Because that's what I did.
I actually took the bed out because the problem was I never had a real bed frame. I basically built one out of two by sixes, and
Gotcha. Gotcha.
it was just this
And
big
you put
bastard.
your mattress on top of that. Yeah.
Exactly. And there was no way. I mean, that thing had to come out. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
weren't going to
Yeah.
be able to do everything. So I just had a mattress on the ground.
This
And
has
then,
to be 2 episodes now because we're talking about stuff that's really cool. And
yeah,
we have to have this episode where we start with this stuff because
yep,
this is really cool shit. Because yeah, like you're talking about, you had that room. All of us at that time had practice. Okay, I think about this all the time, and I say this not to diminish what happened. Okay, this is just fact. Had Chuck not had a garage, death wouldn't exist today. Just think about how different, how just that somewhere in a fucking alternate multiverse, there's a multiverse where that didn't happen.
yep,
Okay, because if Chuck, the whole point that Freddie and I literally got with Chuck was because Freddie didn't have a place to practice at his house. He lived with his grandmother. His dad had turned his garage into like a workshop.
it was a
He
workshop,
had
right?
no
Yeah,
room. He had no
yep,
room. I had a fucking evil stepfather. We don't want to go through this whole fucking scenario, but this guy was a complete prick and he made it impossible. We started rehearsing at my house in my room, like you had just mentioned.
right.
And I put my bed up, so
Against
the
the wall.
mattress was against the wall, so to block out the sound. And then I had one window, so I put the bed frame up against the wall towards the house and the other the mattress in front of the window to block
Right.
the window so to basically muffle the sound. And
Sure.
I put my electric blanket. For those of you that don't know what an electric blanket is, it's this blanket that has wires in it that you can plug in to make you hot, warmer. I had an electric blanket. Why do I have an electric blanket in Florida? I have no fucking idea. For some reason, it was colder back then. I don't know. But I had an electric blanket that I put in front of the door. Like I draped over the door and would shut the
Sure.
door.
Yep.
That was our practice room.
Yep.
Freddie and I started there until my stepfather would cut the electricity off. Well, go down to the breaker, shut the breaker off. Made it really impossible and miserable to rehearse there.
Right.
And had Freddie not met Chuck,
Right.
and Chuck had said, "Hey, I got a house. My parents will let me practice there because we have a garage, a
Right.
two-car garage."
Sure.
Had that not been a reality, things would be different today.
Yep.
But literally, that's like stuff that happened. That's a true story. I mean, Chuck had the garage, and we
Sure.
moved to Altamont Springs, because of it.
Yeah.
We moved from. I lived in Forest City. People don't know,
Right.
but Forest City is about, I think, maybe 3 to 5 miles away from Altamont Springs.
Sure.
It's towards Apopka. I'm talking all this stuff that people have no idea. They
No
have no idea.
clue.
But yeah, no clue. But I'm trying to kilometers. What is 3 miles in kilometers? Like, what is that
Five,
about?
about 5.5 kilometers.
Yeah, so it's 5.5 kilometers away, north,
Right.
kind of northeast. Not, it's northeast of Altamont Springs. Actually, northwest. Sorry, because east would have been towards the sun. So northwest of Altamont Springs is where I lived, and Freddie lived even further away from that. He lived further away.
Right.
So we moved to Chuck's house because Chuck simply had a garage.
Right.
And that literally started it all, is because he had the garage. We were already Mantis, and people seem to get that off because the way that it's been told was it was Chuck's idea, Chuck's band, and he had Mantis. No, 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 no. Sorry.
All good.
Mantis was around weeks, maybe even a month before Chuck was involved.
Right.
It was the two
And,
of us
and look, that's not
playing Venom songs.
look, that's not you. And see, this is the thing that I think I need to interject here. That's not you taking anything away from Chuck. That is you just telling the truth. Those are facts, folks. That's not Cam going, well, fuck Chuck and this and that.
No, 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 no.
That is simply Cam telling you the way it really fucking happened. Regardless of what you read on fucking line, that's the truth.
That's the thing. I think people's what is it? Their expectations get ruined when I
Yes.
tell them this, because they've deified Chuck so much. Is it that a word? Deified?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly
Okay.
it.
They made him a deity, so much that everyone wants to think that he's the god of death metal, and the fact that it was all his ideas and his vision and stuff like that. Not at first, guys. Not at first. Before Zeus, there was Cronus, and I'm not talking about Cronus from fucking Venom either. Although that is kind of a cool, like, little tiny thing there. That is
It
a cool little.
is. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and look, we have, and I'll have to get some people back on here to talk the old days because I think that's what people want to hear, and I realize that, and we people also have to understand that you have spent a large majority of your life telling these stories. Yeah, and over every fucking interview, you're gonna get asked the question. You're gonna get asked the question, what was Chuck like? What was it like playing in a band with Chuck? You're always gonna get the question. That's just it. I get it. You have told the stories a billion times. And I think because of our friendship, I think when we discuss things, I'm able to get you to remember things that you probably just don't remember because you're so used to telling the story
Yeah,
repeatedly over and over again that you have it down pat. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
You have the story down in your head. You
yeah.
know?
I do. I mean, and it does. I'm not gonna lie. It does get kind of like, oh man, again,
Monotonous.
again,
Sure.
again, again,
Of
again. Like,
course.
I mean, you have to understand too. People will say, oh, well, you're just being a dick, or you're just being selfish, or something. Like, I had somebody write me recently and say, hey Cam, I'm a big Death fan. Do you have anything of Chuck's? First off, why would I have this 40 fucking 3 years later? Why would I have anything of Chuck's? Why would you not go to Chuck's relatives for that? Why would ask me? Why ask me? I don't even have fucking shit my own from 43 years ago, and you're asking me if I've got something of Chuck's? Okay, just this is the stupidity I sometimes have to, like, fight.
I I will say something here and I will leave names out. However, there is someone that has been selling stuff from allegedly 40 plus years ago online that constantly finds new boxes hidden somewhere that he digs up to sell things.
Oh man.
That,
We know a couple of people that do this, but
and look, folks, I am not here telling you that what he's selling you is bullshit, but what I'm saying is think about it because what Cam just said I will tell you is pretty fucking common. There are very few of the old legacy guys that kept a lot of shit unless they were collectors. Like Pat. Pat from Hell Witch is a fucking freak. He's a collector. Pat has
yeah,
shit tons of fucking stuff. You know,
I'm Cat's got shit that that is a That's real. You know, that's
Yes,
real that I envy. I'm like, God, I wish I had that. You got that flyer from that show? I don't even have that.
exactly. You know, we know those people. Jim Pedersen still has a massive collection, even though I know he's hiding it. But he still
Yeah.
has a massive collection of fucking shit. There were guys that did collect things. However, yeah, you and your lyrics.
Yeah.
Right.
Not only that, because people always ask about stupid shit like this. Okay. I have this. I have this. Now, is it an actual real one? No. I have a copy, but it's a copy from back then.
Right.
The very first, not the fake shit that you're gonna see on the internet, not the gay, oh, damn it, not cut that, not the stuff that's on the internet that people are saying is the real thing. This is, in fact, the first death show flyer. Us and Tempter, my artwork, my artwork, my artwork. Some of this stuff is obviously pasted. That's from Combat Records, pasted. Picture of us as death. The logo before there was a logo. My handwriting, proving, proving once and for all who created the death logo. That's even the that's proto death logo. Proto death logo. That yes, my handwriting, my map, my hand-drawn map when they did that back in the day. What's it say right there? To Altamont. To Altamont. Hand-drawn map.
I was muted the whole time and I'm laughing.
I know. Hand-drawn map. So this is the first ever death show. Not Mantis. This was the first show that we did as death. Notice the date. The date is on the flyer. Okay, it doesn't say the year, but we know this was 1984.
Yep.
November 9th, 1984.
Yep.
Because after this show, we played with Nasty Savage. But Death had played a prior show. And this is that proof of that. This is the proof of that. And I just wanted to bring that out.
Well,
So
no,
this is stuff we could talk about. This is stuff we could talk about on this episode or other episodes. Like I said, this is gonna have to be cut up.
yeah,
It's into 2 episodes.
we'll cut this up into 2 episodes. But look, and that's exactly the stuff that people want to see. People want to see those, those things. And I want to find a way of, digging out those things, those silly memories or those things that you think aren't important that, these younger kids might. And it's only because of the fact that, it's the stupid shit that these kids will, most of them don't get to experience anymore. And the funny thing is, I think a lot of the kids that do get to experience some of the stuff that we went through aren't even metal kids. It's this whole rebirth of hardcore. And it's these young hardcore bands and these punk bands you see having these basement shows again and having, armory shows and VFW hall shows and all that stuff.
Which that was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, so, people have to understand that back in those days, there weren't clubs for this.
No venues, no.
When you guys were playing, there were no clubs.
I actually think the Plus 3 may have been the very first time any venue in that area, actually legit venue now, because we had the FBI, I believe at the time, or the station at the time.
Station was there.
And
JG Whispers was there.
I believe that the Plus 3 was the first ever to have a death metal show. I think so, because they had Death and Carcass there as well. But I don't think any other venues at that time were actually, because most of it was all hair metal. And what's his name? The guy from Winger, not Kip Winger, the other dude from, I don't know, all
Janie
those
Lane of Warren.
Janie Lane. People don't realize he lived here and he had a club here. He had a club downtown.
I think that so I know the Beecham was having shows before Plus 3.
Oh, were they? Okay. I don't remember that.
They
I remember the
had-
Beecham having shows, but I didn't know if it was before Plus 3.
Yeah.
I remember the afterwards. I remember seeing DRI there and almost died. Yeah. As well as Suicidal Tendencies there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because I know I would have seen Oh shit.
Napalm Death, because I know they played there
Yeah,
back in
no,
the day.
I know I saw Sepultura, Obituary, and Sadist there, and I know that was just as Cause of Death was coming out, which I believe was 91.
Okay,
I think
maybe,
I don't
yeah,
know, but anyway, so the point is, yes, Plus Three was one of those original venues that had stuff. There were, but there were also crazy places. There were non-traditional places. There were
yeah, yeah,
reggae places. I
yeah.
know there was some reggae bar. I didn't go, but I know. I think Tim went to see. I want to say it was the Dark Angel Forbidden Death tour. Played there,
Oh
but
yeah, they played some weird places. I remember that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
remember.
So
Yeah,
there were non-traditional places because there were no clubs like people are used to today.
yep,
I
yep.
mean, they
Hmm.
just didn't fucking exist. You played some off the wall fucking places. I've seen some. I mean, you've played where the fucking the Rocky Point gig
Yeah,
was.
Rocky Point Beach Resort. No clubs would put us in places like Ybor City,
Right.
downtown, where it says the Cuban Club,
Right.
and the
Yeah.
Cuban Club was a reggae bar,
Right.
reggae club,
Sure.
and we a lot of hardcore shows because like I can't say any of the shows there were metal. Well,
Right.
we were a metal band that opened for DRI and Agnostic Front and other bands that were put there. And we'd be stuck in the somewhere like third or fourth on the line. We Belching Penguins would open first, and then
Belgian
and then
Penguins.
yeah, and then
Oh,
some other hardcore band, and then us, and then one other band, and then the headliner. So we were always like in the middle. We'd shake it up. We'd get the skinheads riled up for some reason. Let's fucking long hair fuckers. Let's get them.
Oh gosh, but that dude, that was the joy of it. And like I said, that's the thing these kids don't they haven't you don't read online. The stuff I want to find is the stuff that, when they Google, like you said, when they Google those early days, the stuff that they don't hear. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So generally when you guys would practice, how long would you guys usually jam?
Sometimes all day, man. It all really depended.
Right.
Sometimes it was like I was never in a rush to go anywhere, so
Of
I
course.
was like I was easy.
Sure.
I was like, hey, let's go again, whatever. If somebody had something to do, like somebody was always taking off because they always had something better to do. But and usually that left Chuck and I to continue to write stuff, and that's what we did. I mean, there was a lot of stuff when those days came where somebody would bolt. Chuck and I would be together, like, well, fuck it, man. Let's write together. Let's do something together. And that's why songs like, Baptized in Blood and Beyond the Unholy Grave came out of that stuff because that was just Chuck and I just saying, fuck it, he's not here. Let's just go ahead and keep writing, you know. And that's just some of the staple songs. That's some of the best shit. That
Right.
shit went on to be on Scream Bloody Gore
Right.
because that was the better stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like
No, no.
diminish Freddie, but
Right.
why did Chuck not continue to use half his songs?
Right.
Because Chuck's writing had become better. Chuck's writing had become more technical, and structurally it was more exciting.
Sure.
It wasn't just verse chorus end. Structurally he started putting stuff in there. That was more. I won't say intricate at the time, but was more than just the typical AC/DC bread and butter kind of like, or whatever they call it, meat and potatoes death metal. It was more. There was more to it.
He was finding out who he was as a musician, and it's you
Yeah,
see
yeah,
that, and you see that through the history of the records. And my personal opinion on it, is that had he been able to do the human stuff at the beginning, he would have done that at the beginning. But the problem was he
yeah.
wasn't there.
Exactly.
He
Yeah, yeah,
wasn't there.
yeah.
He might have been there mentally, but he wasn't there with his abilities yet. And it took
Yeah. Well,
it
no,
took
you had said something. You had said something couple times, a couple of weeks back, and you said that what happened to Chuck was he was stuck with the musicians that he had in the beginning, so
yes,
he could only do so much
yes,
because the limitations of those musicians.
yes,
It wasn't his limitations. It was the limitations of others that was holding him back. I think that's
yes.
kind of how you said that. Not
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
and that's exactly what it is, and that's why. after spiritual healing, you see a kind of a shift, but not really, because he had Murphy at that time. But
Yeah,
as
yeah,
soon as Human came out, it was just night and day. He went and found musicians, and
yeah.
he wanted non-death metal musicians. You know
Exactly.
what?
Yep.
He wanted to play more technical, and when you see the people he was gravitating to back in those days and the bands he was, listening to and the friends we know that he was hanging out with, he gravitated to non-death metal stuff. You know what I mean? Or stuff that was death metal that was extremely technical. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? The infamy stuff was extremely fucking technical at that time for death metal. Cynic
Hmm.
was extreme. It wasn't. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember seeing Cynic open up for Cannibal Corpse and Sinister, and no one paid any attention because they were just like, "What is this?" And it wasn't.
Hmm.
And it's still to this very day. I don't like atheists. I'm not an atheist person because that's not the kind of metal I like. I'm not a prog person. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
Exactly.
I
Yep.
think I think that was always in Chuck. He just didn't know how to get there until he got those musicians. And once he got
Yeah.
the
Yeah. I agree. I agree 100%. And the difference is, and I don't think this diminishes me in any way, but
no,
I've always said the only death metal album that Death did was Scream Bloody Gore. And I know people are going to get mad, they're going to fight me. No, that's not true. It's all death metal. No, when I mean death metal, I'm talking about just raw, aggressive, and lyric wise too. Lyrics that are based in on death, the macabre, horror. Some people will say Satan or whatever evil. I'm just going to say just generally those darker subjects. That to me is what death metal represents. That's why I've never wanted to elevate because I love this shit. I love it. If you don't love something, then don't do it. And he was a perfect example of not loving it, so he changed his shit because he
yeah,
wanted to do what he wanted to do. I stay where I'm at in the meat and potatoes death metal, you know, allegedly, because because I love this shit. I love this stuff. Okay, I'm going to be 60 years old. I still would rather watch a Texas Chainsaw Massacre than I would The Sound of Music. Does
okay.
that make me a different type of person? I
No, but
don't
no, but look,
a lesser person. It does make me a different type of person, but it doesn't make me.
you are look, there aren't many of you. Um, Massacre has basically generally stayed the same musically. Except for a couple stray bullets here and there that was towards the end of your first run, and then when you were gone, basically Massacre is Massacre, just like Paul with Master is Master doesn't fucking change. You know what I mean? Paul plays the way Paul plays. There are very few bands from those days that have stayed and understand this is what I do. And some people criticize people and go, "Oh, well, they're just yeah, but you guys play what you play because you like what you play." You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah.
You're not out there writing political fucking lyrics. You know what I mean? You're not out there writing
Nope.
socio-political fucking lyrics. You write horror fucking lyrics. That's who you
Nope.
are. That's your songwriting style.
Yeah.
And you know it and you do it and you do it
Exactly. And that,
and you do it well.